This is KCR, the sound of state.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mainstage Mavericks on KCR College Radio. Joining me today is Sebastian Slovin. Sebastian grew up in La Jolla, California, and traveled extensively as a professional bodyboarder. He holds a BA in Environmental Policy from San Diego State University and an MA in Leadership Studies from the University of San Diego. He and his wife, Sonia, founded Nature Unplugged, which focuses on cultivating wellness through healthier relationships with technology and a deeper connection to nature. His newest book, Ashes in the Ocean, is available to purchase on Amazon. Also joining me is Susan Faris, who runs SJF Communications, which specializes in marketing, public relations, social media, writing, and public speaking, photography, coaching, and legal nurse consulting services. She represents Sebastian Slovin as his publicist. Welcome, Sebastian. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about Ashes in the Ocean, your newest book.
Sure, yeah. So just launched this several months ago in April, and it's really the story of losing my father when I was young. He passed away by suicide, and it kind of goes through the journey of living in the shadow of a suicide and really not dealing with that, and then eventually facing what I had been running away from for many years, and then coming out the other side and with some insight and lessons, and I felt compelled to share with other people who had been through that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Susan, you contacted me to have Sebastian on the show today, and so when you first read the book, what were your thoughts on it?
I thought that Sebastian was extremely articulate for his age and for the experience, and not only surviving as a survivor of suicide, but thriving and being resilient and, changing his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll talk about, how he changed his life. But I was just very impressed, and I read it like within a night or two. I'm reading it again. Each time I read it, I get a little bit more out of it. But he's just very articulate and heartfelt, and he wants to help other people.
Definitely. I felt, reading this book, I'm a very slow reader, but reading this book, it was super fast, and it was super captivating to me because it's just a story of just resilience and strength throughout the entire thing. And I also found it unique too because there's not a lot of books as well about San Diego, and so I felt like reading it was interesting reading it, and you're describing, having grown up in San Diego, you're describing all these places, and I could just see it perfectly in my mind, like La Jolla Cove, La Jolla Shores, Wind and Sea Beach, and, Del Mar, like all these places. And so that was really interesting to see just like, your entire experience and that perspective, taking place like throughout somewhere that I know like super well. And so it just felt like really real, the whole thing. And so it was just a very just powerful, just honest book. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind words from you both. Yeah.
Of course. And so when did you decide to write this book? I don't want to spoil anything for future readers, but there was a section near the end of the book where you say that you were going through helping your mom, right, through some difficult times, and that was what prompted you to say, "Oh, I want to write, just the story of just this experience and about your early life."
Yeah. So I think I first had the idea to write this book probably in my mid-20s. I kind of described this journey I took to go out and learn about my dad, and kind of at the end of that, I really had this. I feel like I have some incredible lessons, and I want to share this with other people. And I, would make an attempt to write it, to sit down and write it, and I would become very quickly overwhelmed and put it away. And there was a number of start and stops over the years. And then, as you mentioned, several years ago, my mom went through a difficult time, and I was her caretaker, and it allowed me it brought a lot of this stuff back to the surface and made it clear that this is something I really I really want to do. And so probably 2 or 3 years ago, I buckled down and finished it.
Totally. When did you so like for the writing process, it was sporadic then throughout a lot of the because you would put it down and then you'd work more on it. Was there a push that made you say like I'm going to finish this book? Like how many drafts did you go through? Were there?
That's a good question. in the teens, maybe 20s.
How many of different drafts you wrote?
I mean, yeah, different, and not extremely different, but different,
Right.
versions of this.
Wow.
Yeah, and so some of the earlier ones were pretty rough, and then whittled it down to what we have now.
Going, for you sitting down and going through a lot of your past memories and trying to put that to paper, were there things that seemed clouded to you when you were writing it down, or was it like suddenly it just came flooding back and you remembered it as if it was yesterday?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of some of the stuff I wasn't really aware of, or wasn't really clear to me. But when I started to dig into it and sit with it, it would become a lot more clear. There were certainly other times where I would talk to my mom or other family friends or people who knew my dad to get clarity on a situation when I was young. So it was a little bit of both.
And just because reading through it, it was hard. It was hard just reading, a lot of the early stuff that you went through, and like there was a chapter early on in the book about, the race, the rough water race. And does that still happen today?
Yeah, and just to add a look, you mean the rough water swim? I'll give a little more context.
Yeah.
There's this. We're in San Diego. There's the annual rough water swim. It's a big swim in La Jolla every year, and my dad had entered and won like 10 years in a row or something like that. He was just this legendary swimmer and kind of always the best. And after he died, I had this very strong desire to compete and to win, and train for it. And the morning of the race, I just could not bring myself to compete, and it was the possibility of losing and it just felt like I needed to win for my dad and for the legacy. And I was like 7 years old or 6 years old, and
right.
And, that I think overwhelm around competition, around not being the best, lasted for a number of years, but it's not something I experience today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You were able to overcome it after many years.
Yeah. I think it's just getting clear on, that winning is awesome and it's a wonderful experience, but it doesn't define who I am or my value.
Did you ever participate in the swim?
I never did.
You never did?
No, I never did. Yeah, I that freaked me out too much. That first, I continued to swim, not competitively, but shortly after that, I got really into bodyboarding.
Mm-hmm.
Familiar? It's the same as boogie boarding. I have to sometimes explain it to people, but with flippers and all that, I got really
into. Use flippers with it.
Yeah, I use flippers.
So you're not on a board, or you are on a board?
Yeah, so on a board,
okay,
a boogie board or a bodyboard, same thing. So
gotcha. Smaller
than a surfboard, on a board with flippers. And I think shortly after my dad died, I was into it before that as a really young person. Mm-hmm. But I got really into it after he passed away, and that became my kind of physical outlet. And also I started to compete through middle school and high school.
And that took you to a lot of places. You kind of rose through the ranks of bodyboarding, and you were able to travel to places such as Hawaii, and you went to Australia. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, certainly. And I'll just back up a little bit to I want to share that after my dad died, my family dynamic changed dramatically, and it was very tough for me. My survival mechanism was to just kind of not talk about it, to try and numb and suppress, and it was a struggle the years after he died.
Mm-hmm.
My outlet, I think the reason I'm still around today is because I had the ocean. And my dad was cremated after he died, and we spread his ashes at the La Jolla Cove. And after that, I always had a deep connection with the ocean, but after that, if I got back to the ocean, it was like visiting my dad again. So that was my driver and inspiration for bodyboarding. And no matter, my life wasn't going that well on land, but anytime I had free time, I'd get to the ocean. And so I spent so much time out there. I got good at this sport, competed, as I mentioned, got some sponsorships. And then after high school, didn't have the greatest grades, didn't go to college, but I had this opportunity to travel as a professional bodyboarder and got to go, all over the place.
Yeah. I thought those were some interesting funny stories about, how you and your friends were, in Hawaii, and you were talking about like, it was like you guys and girls, and you went through some crazy adventures like through bodyboarding, and so, and it was interesting to see like, just like, because like your whole experience in life is just it's very different from a lot of other people, just things you went through, and also just like the career paths, like you were a yoga instructor, and like that was a big goal of yours, was to become like a master yogi, I think is what you were saying.
Yeah.
And then you went through an accident with bodyboarding, correct?
Yeah, it was sort of maybe a repetitive use thing, but I had a few bad falls or wipeouts on my hip, leg and hip, and that turned into a major hip issue, and I kind of had to stop bodyboarding and stop doing my yoga and stuff. So. Yeah.
And that was just crushing to you, because that was the way that you were able to, that was kind of your outlet, was like the ocean and being outside and outdoors and being active like every day. And so for you to be, you were holed up like in your house for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden like you were trying to push it in physical therapy, and suddenly it got worse and you had to go back into surgery. That was like I can semi relate to that, because I didn't have to go in for a separate surgery, but I was caved up for a little bit because I got knee surgery. I had a torn meniscus, and so I remember feeling just so like, I just had like so much anxiety, and I just wanted to like get up and just like run, but I had to stay sitting down with my legs stretched up, and I was just so exhausted and just overwhelmed by it. And I just felt like all these feelings of just like the way you were describing it, I was just like, I could relate to how you were feeling with that situation.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how did that resolve, or was it just when you got back on your feet and could move?
I guess for me it was just like, I just had to tell myself in my mind, okay, like it's gonna get better, it's gonna heal, like it's fine. This is not like, it's not the end of the world, because I had never broken a single bone in my body, and then I had the knee surgery, and I was just, I was sitting down and just arched up, and I could barely move, and I had to use crutches. And so for me, it was just kind of like, it was just such a shift in the way I normally went about things. And so I was very like, it was super overwhelming for me. And it wasn't as long as, when you had your surgery, but like, I sympathized with how you felt, because I felt like, oh, I've been there, and I wanted to, and I wish I had read I wish that book had come out, 3 years ago, so I could have realized, oh, like there's better ways to cope with how I'm feeling right now than just like, throwing in the towel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting experience for me, because, as I get into in detail in the book, my dad dies, he was this sort of perfect, larger than life human, had it all together, physical, specimen, master champion swimmer and all that. And I kind of unknowingly went down the same path with my bodyboarding. Mm-hmm. And then kind of had these realizations that, I'm more than just my bodyboarding. I'm more than my physical ability and all this intellectual understanding that I'm more than this. And then had the surgery, and then the second one. And it was a really interesting, wake up call for me, or lesson for me, that so much of my, I guess, sense of self-worth was in my wrapped up in my physical ability. And I think having the opportunity to be still for a while was actually very challenging and very helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. I really just throughout a lot of things. There's I see the book as being, it could be very successful for a young adult reader, definitely, because I feel like and a lot of issues with contemporary society is that everything is about like oh, you're either a winner or you're a loser. And so, but I feel like there's a gray area between that. It's not all black and white. Like there's a gray area where there's going to be peaks and valleys in life, and there's going to be successes and failures. And so I see it like, and I see young adult readers being able to read it and sympathizing and saying like, listen, like it's not all about winning. Like it's not all about this. And if I don't achieve that, then like I'm worthless. It should be, I feel like it could teach them more than that. Teach them more about life, and, utilizing relationships and making things that are like making life worth living besides, being a success or a failure in their eyes.
Yeah, I think that's a really great points. And as you mentioned that, a lot of my, I think, thinking when I was writing this was, what would I say to myself, a younger version of myself, and also, kind of a teen version of myself, or younger adult version of myself, and because there's so much of that in our society. I think, especially in San Diego here, it's push to achieve, and it's intense.
Yeah,
It's
my
intense.
former high school, it was
Right.
it was all about that. It was very just driven on like, you need to succeed and get into a great school so you can have a lot of money and then you'll be, worth something. And like that was how a lot of people kind of identified their self-worth, was like, oh, it's grades, I get into a good school, I get a good job, I get married, I have a family, like I will like win at life, it will be my success. And so,
Yeah.
and I feel like, there's more to that, there's nature, there's, relationships, there's like the world. And so I feel like, there's just, this book could just teach people to just like, just take a deep breath and, realize like there's so much more to things.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the way you're describing your high school and the environment was very much how I came to see my dad in a lot of ways. Like he was that person to a T, I think, needing to have the, make the certain amount of money, have the certain, look a certain way, have a certain physical ability, like be the best in all things all the time. And from what I gathered with talking to different people and was that it just never ended. You'd set a goal, charge toward it, achieve it a lot of times, set the next goal, charge toward it, and there was very little appreciation of the process or achieving that goal, and so it made me really question like why am I doing what I'm doing,
Right.
and really what is this about? Because you keep going with that thread. You got to get the grades to get into school, and then you got to go to the good school to get the good job. You got to get the good job to whatever, get the partner that you want, or to get the house. And then you got or to get the retirement you want. And then all of a sudden you're at the end of your life and you're like, what the hell just happened?
This is like, I don't know if this is relevant or not, but when I was younger, there was this youth theater awards kind of organization. And when I was younger, like all my friends had got this award, and I was always like thinking in the back of my mind, like, oh, if I got this award, I'd be like considered good just like them and everything. And I remember like I finally like got the award, like years after, and I remember getting it, and then afterwards I was just like, okay, like I'd wanted this for years, but like now what? Like that's just another, like it's just like it's pointless, that's not a real goal, it's just like, yeah, it's like an achievement, but like I feel, but if like once I won it, I was like, okay, now I want to win another one, it's just like a never ending, repetition of like, success, and like you don't want to hit a failure.
Right. And I think where it gets tricky here is like you can imagine someone listening to this and be like, well, does that mean I just do nothing all day? Or I think there's still, it's wonderful to go out and achieve or to do well or to compete at a high level. I think it's just when
People should be motivated.
Yeah. Or where's the motivation coming from? Is it from within you? Like this is something I want to do versus, is it external? Like, is it because of the, like what people will think or getting the, like, the certificate on the
You got to find satisfaction, within yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not just, like if nothing, like you're not truly happy if like no matter what like success you're getting, you're not satisfied, because then you want to get like, 20 other awards, you want to get more things, or you want to get more money, or you want to get, just, into all these different areas. And so it's an issue, I think, that like a lot of society just like presses on people.
Yeah. And I just want to say, a lot of what I'm doing now is getting out and speaking about suicide and mental health and the stigma around this. And I think it's important to clarify that what we're talking about here is I wouldn't say it's the reason my dad died, right? It was a factor among many factors.
Right.
Suicide's a super complex, mental health is a super complex thing, and there's so many pieces, right? But this was something that certainly was a factor in my dad's sort of mental, physical well-being that we have control over.
Mm-hmm. You were 6 years old when he passed?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. When you were going, did you find throughout your early childhood, it seemed like, even though you were 6 years old when he passed, like his memory was just alive inside of you and in your mind for years, correct? It just seemed like, you never really, those early, like you never forgot a lot of memories that you had with your dad, even when you were super young.
Yeah, I think a lot of those are really etched into my memory. And, especially after he died, I think the memories I had of him were amplified and was, I want to hold on to these. And, he was this, I think, I don't know if this is just me as a little child, but I think other people said this too. He was like a larger than life kind of guy, like really charismatic and
heroic. Like Superman to you.
Superman, yeah, he was Superman. So you don't forget about Superman,
Right. No, you don't. Yeah. And so do you was there like do you remember him ever blatantly telling you, like was he like would he push you to go like swimming with him and like, going out farther? Like he taught you how to swim, right?
He taught me how to swim, yeah. And I don't remember him blatantly being like, you need to be the best,
right.
Or it wasn't that, but it was, I think, just an unspoken rule.
Right, that was his mindset.
Yeah.
He was a tough swimmer from South Africa, and so like his life experiences were a lot different than like a lot of people that grew up in La Jolla or that were from like other places, because he grew up in apartheid, right?
He did. Well, and this is interesting, right? He grew up in apartheid. He's white and was very had a lot of privilege in that society.
Mm-hmm.
So although it was different in ways than La Jolla, it's actually interesting. The place he grew up is called Sea Point. It's in a little suburb of Cape Town, coastal community of Cape Town. You could walk down the street there and be like, "Am I in La Jolla?" It's almost exactly. And there's Table Mountain in the background, and he grew up actually with a lot of privilege. And this is, this is something that I didn't get into explicitly in the book, but I think after writing it and thinking more about it, this was one of the things that was, I think, a challenge for him. Was he kind of always got what he wanted, and certainly had skills and charisma and all these things, but really struggled when he faced disappointment or when he lost.
Definitely
it was getting all the things all the time. High profile swimmer business. He was in the
he had a successful career in swimming, but also a successful career in business.
Right.
And then everyone liked him.
Yeah,
nice guy. Like so he had like everything. He had everything going for him all the time.
Yeah, until it didn't go his way all the time, and then I think that's where it was really challenging for him.
Right. I've heard that South Africa and San Diego, or at least in Cape Town, the weather is pretty much identical.
Yeah, it's so similar. It's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think there's a similar vibe. I think I'm talking about the physical geography, the weather, stuff like that. It's very similar. A lot of South Africans actually from Cape Town immigrated to San Diego because, and that's why my dad came out here. But he kind of did. Where can I find that was like my upbringing? And
did they want to come to America? Was that the main reason, or just better opportunities, or?
Well, he had an opportunity to swim. He got a full ride to swim at Southern Methodist University, and that was his entry point to the States.
Mm-hmm.
So and then once he was here, he was like, college gave him an opportunity to live here, and then that's when he's like, San Diego's he didn't want to stay in Texas. It was, San Diego was the place for him.
San Diego's the place.
Yeah.
You lived in a house that was pretty close to the beach in La Jolla.
Correct. Yeah, when I was young, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you pretty much went to the beach every single day, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a pretty incredible upbringing. Very fortunate. And we lived right across from Windansea Beach, so went there, and so we'd go to.
I'd seen your portraits there once.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I'd like to see those after.
Super sunny. When it's right around sunset.
Yeah.
It's really, the sun gets in your eyes, and
yeah.
But it was a cool place, and there's like the little I don't know how to describe it, but there's that little umbrella made out of
it's the surf Windansea Surf Club hut.
And alcohol is legal there, right?
Oh,
like
I didn't know
bring. I think so. I think it's like one of the few beaches where like legally you can bring like drinks and everything. So because I remember when we were there was a lot of bottles everywhere. I think there might have been a party the night before.
Yeah.
There was a lot of bottles strewn about.
It's certainly a hangout. I'm unclear whether it's legal. We'll look into the.
Yeah, well, we gotta. our researchers will look into that.
Yeah.
But
the La Jolla, I think there's something magical though about the beaches in La Jolla, right? You know,
I love La Jolla.
It's unreal.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's a surf spot, wind and sea.
Good
I'm not a surfer. So for a lot of the stuff in the book, like I knew of where, surfers like to congregate, and there's certain beaches, and I knew wind and sea. So wind and sea is a surf spot.
Wind and Sea is a surf spot. Yeah, popular surf spot.
It's just the waves just form properly there, where it's good surfing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Shredding the gnar.
Shredding the gnar.
All of that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's it's not like on the world stage. It's not like a world class spot.
Like Hawaii's got like world class surf spots.
We're not dealing with that sort of level, but it's a really good surf spot, and we're fortunate in San Diego to have a lot of good surf spots. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to try surfing.
We can make it happen.
We could. Yeah. Definitely. You, your mom, and your sister. What's your sister's?
Her name is. Oh, was that Tanasa?
Tanasa.
Yeah, it's
gotcha.
Different.
I didn't want to
different
mispronounce that. Tanasa. And what does Tanasa mean?
Tanasa means, so the way I understand it is Tanase was I think a Swahili word meaning the ultimate one. Mm-hmm. And so they like that name, kind of the Southern African influence, and then just kind of tweaked it slightly and came up with Tanasa.
Hey, throughout the whole book, I was just memorized and just astounded at just the strength that your mom had throughout the whole ordeal, because she was just, it seemed like she just gave it her all to help you and your sister out through the whole thing. So I felt like that was just it was amazing.
Yeah, I think it's I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's the book so focused on my dad that in talking about it I sometimes overlook that my mom, I certainly wouldn't be here without my mom getting us through that very challenging time. And yeah, she was an absolute rock star hero, and I admire her so much.
Following your dad's passing, you moved to Del Mar, correct?
Yeah, right. A little further north. My mom worked in Carlsbad, so we moved further north.
She worked for a school district, or?
Yeah, she worked for Carlsbad Unified School District. She was a speech and language therapist.
Where in Del Mar did you live?
We lived on Mango Way, near Del Mar Hills, kind of near the Vons.
Mango Drive?
Yeah, I was on Mango Way, which is up the way from Mango Drive.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I know that. So there was the little Vaughn shopping center.
Right by there.
Yeah, right by there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was like looking, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but when my dad died, we were left in a pretty bad financial situation, and mm-hmm. my mom worked extremely hard to, Del Mar was way out of our price range, and she just made it work, and allowed for us to get into an incredible school district and all that. But she sacrificed a great deal, and
I felt like it was amazing she did that too, because she knew how much the ocean meant to you,
right.
And so you're still relatively close, and so that was really cool.
Yeah, she's all right, my mom.
Yeah?
She's all right.
Yeah, how's she doing?
She's doing pretty well.
Yeah. How old is she? I don't want to say that. Never mind. But
looking over at Susan. Should I answer this? Let me check in with my publicist here. She's doing well. Yeah, she's doing well.
That's awesome.
That's
really cool.
She's older than 30. I'll just leave it there.
Okay, perfect. Sorry to walk into that. Yeah. Your sister. What does your sister do?
My sister does marketing and social media stuff right now. She lives in San Diego as well. She lives in Leucadia.
She's also younger than 40.
Yeah, right? Younger than 40, correct. Yeah. I'm probably safer with her, but yeah.
Where does she live?
She lives in Leucadia.
Leucadia, okay, in Encinitas. And you live in Encinitas too now.
I live in Encinitas. Yeah, we're all in the same zone. Yeah,
awesome. Awesome. Never left San Diego.
No, I traveled a ton.
Yeah.
And always came back.
Yeah. You going back a bit. You moved to Perth, Australia, when you were super young. You were like 5 or something, right?
Correct. Yeah, I was 5, and my sister was just, what was she, 1 or 2? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we actually originally moved to Melbourne. So immigrated from San Diego to Melbourne. My dad had some work connections there, and he actually had family in Perth. So we first went to Melbourne, and gave it a go there, and this was the type of thing where he kind of wanted to start anew. And we were in Melbourne for I think 6 months or so, and it was clear after that time that he wanted to go somewhere else. So we just kind of started over in Perth again. And my dad had close family friends and family members, some cousins from South Africa who lived in Perth.
They proved to be really valuable to you later on in the book, where you talk about going back and talking to them about your dad and the way he was, and you were talking. Can you explain that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so and just some timeline here. So I was I think 5 when I was there with my dad and my mom and my sister when we were really young. We're in Melbourne for a bit, then in Perth. And when we were in Perth, we stayed with a family called, their last name was the Kennedys. Mm-hmm. It was John, David, and Sarah, who were my mom's age. And actually, John, David, and my dad's name was Vernon, they grew up together in South Africa. Or John David was from Johannesburg, but they actually swam together, competed against each other, and had stayed close friends since those early days. So they were close family friends. We left Perth not long after arriving when I was with my family, went back to San Diego. Basically, my dad, once we were back in San Diego, my dad, again, realized he wanted to be somewhere else. And he was kind of going downhill at this point, mental health-wise. And so he ended up wanting to move back to Australia again, I think about a year after, or 6 months after we got back. And my mom was like, I got to stay for some stability for the kids.
It was interesting in the book because you talked a lot about how he was trying to find like the perfect place for you all to live.
Totally.
Like talking about a place that had little to no traffic. You guys could live in a big house that was near the beach. You could have a well-paying job. It was safe, and so and it was really because it's really interesting because it's almost like he wanted to try and find like a utopia. For you guys.
Yeah, and it was like not a real spot, which I realized later. I didn't at the time. I was just like, it's a big adventure. We're moving all over the place, but it was like South Africa without apartheid, without the segregation and instability, or Australia, but with a stronger financial system, or America without the population.
Because he went to Australia and then he realized, I'd actually make more money if I was in the U.S. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So he was searching, I think, for his fix in another example of finding it in the external form, in a place. And so eventually my mom was like, I got to stay here for the kids. She had a job and some stability, and so he went back to Australia, and that's where he died in Perth, 3 or 4 weeks later. So, Sarah and John David Kennedy stayed in touch with my mom and us when we were young. I'd have phone calls with them every once in a while, and they were close family friends and really supportive of my mom throughout. And, just to clarify, after my dad died, I basically didn't talk about him after that, or hardly did. I certainly didn't talk about his death.
Well, none of you really did.
No.
Right?
Yeah, it was this major stigma around it, and a lot of shame around the suicide thing, and we didn't talk about it.
There's another reason, another push to move out of La Jolla. Like you moved to Del Mar, and your mom wanted to be closer to work, and also financial troubles. But also, there's an incident that happened with your dad at his job where it was a Ponzi scheme that was occurring, or
I don't know too much of the fine details here, but it's it was kind of people that were older than me back then. As the guy's name was J. David Dominelli, was the guy, and so my dad was involved, but it wasn't, from my understanding, like major. He wasn't doing stuff where he was going to get put into jail, but it was, borderline shady. And basically what happened was he ended up losing money. He lost a lot of his own money and a lot of his clients' money. And
a lot of his clients were also fellow South Africans. Right, and so they held some anger towards your family for that.
Totally, yeah. So some people, and so it was La Jolla for a number of reasons. For my mom, was not a good place to be. Mm-hmm. Just the memories of my dad, and then people that didn't treat her well after that.
Right,
which is hard for me to think about even now. It's frustrating. So we moved out, and so a number of years went by after my dad died. 6 to when I was 17, my senior year of high school. I went to Torrey Pines, And I had the opportunity to go there to do some bodyboarding and to reconnect with some of these family friends. And I was kind of, on the one hand, super excited to go there and surf some great waves, reconnect with family friends. But I was terrified that the topic of my dad would certainly be coming up, because I was going to where he died, and
Right.
and so I get
it was
there.
super hard because you never really talked about it.
Yeah.
Like there were moments in the book where you would confide with close friends of his, and you went to SMU, and there was that, you talked to one of your dad's friends, and you broke down, from like, just talking about it, because it just like had all these bottled up emotions, and then you went and talked to them in Perth, and so it was just like, like with all of it bottled up inside, like talking about it was just like, it was a release for you emotionally.
Yeah, that SMU trip was certainly, that was one of the few times I kind of stepped in and talked about my dad, and I just completely broke down, and then I didn't really talk about it again. Then went to Australia. When I got to Australia, the first day I was there, John David asked if I wanted to go on a walk, or invited me to go on a walk in their neighborhood, and it's like extraordinarily beautiful place, and walk down by this river, and it was a place that he and my dad had walked a lot, and we're kind of, the beginning is just just casual conversation, talking about the weather and similarities to San Diego and Perth, and then sure enough, like within a few minutes, he starts talking about my dad, and I'm kind of freaking out,
Right.
and didn't talk for a while. He just sort of shared how he had a great deal of empathy for us, and I could feel it. He was like, I know how hard this was on you guys and and your family, and it was certainly terrible for us, and then he goes on to share that his dad, so John David's dad, also took his own life when he was a kid.
Wow.
And I was like totally shocked. I didn't know this going into it. And he shared about his whole experience. And a lot of it was mirroring, I resonated so much with what he was going through. It was a lot of, or what he had been through. Like, it was the isolation, never talking about it, the stigma around it. And after he shared, I felt like, I'm like, here's someone who's been through what I've been through and come out the other side. And I felt comfortable with him, and I shared like really openly for the first time ever since my dad died, all the stuff I'd been holding on to for so long.
Wow. Yeah. It was several years of just, bits of closure. It seemed like, with you, opening up and, realizing and just trying to get over, the stigma of suicide, because you spent like, it was just, it was hard for me to read about, your childhood, because there was so much that was just, it was you, and you were going through, periods where you were depressed, and, you were like drinking, and, it was just really, it was sad, because you didn't have like an outlet where you could kind of vent, and, you weren't talking to anyone about your father. And so, it seemed like, after, like, once reconnecting with people, and you started to go on your journey about, reconnecting with others to try and find out all the stuff you could about your dad, right?
Yeah, correct. And a couple points. I think one thing is that I think that's why I'm so passionate about, getting the word out about the book and talking about the subject, because that's what I think stigma does, among other things. There's a great deal of shame, but it isolates people. Mm-hmm. I felt that there's something wrong with me by association of being, tied to my dad, and I can't talk about it. If I talk about it, people will judge me or shame me, or I'll be, and I was isolating anyway. So it's a really terrible thing. And I was certainly not the only one dealing with that, and I think that was what John David shared with me. He felt alone in that too. And then until he kind of started to face it and talk about it. So, and I would say, that conversation with John David was very much the like planting the seed, or the turning point for me, and then gave me enough confidence to go out and start to have more conversations. And that's when I set out and kind of made it a mission to figure out and learn more about who my dad was and what happened to him. Mm-hmm. And it was that process that I kind of slowly learned how to feel again, and not just kind of suppress everything.
Do you feel like the stigma of suicide, do you think it's changed from, when you were a teenager or an early child to now?
That's a great question. I think
I feel like the conversation about mental illness and mental health, it definitely is a lot different than it was, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, I would say it's certainly better. And there's certainly
Yeah.
more people talking about it, and it's incredible to see that. And I think there's a lot more work to be done still. It still exists, and it's not like a done deal, but it's certainly better, I think, than the 90s were when I was going through this, and then certainly better than the 50s and 60s when John David was going through it.
Were you religious growing up? Like, did you guys practice a religion or no?
No, not really. My dad's side of the family was Jewish. I wasn't really raised with any of that. He went to predominantly Christian schools. He wasn't religious. My mom's side of the family wasn't religious.
You celebrated Christmas.
Christmas. Yeah, I went to the church sort of on the holidays, and so that was it wasn't a major factor, a major player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were you ever in therapy, you and your sister, growing up?
No, yes, I was, but it was not with my sister, and it was pretty brief. And I think I was
grief
maybe
counseling, or
no, it wasn't right away. It was, I think I was like 11 or 12, and it was the beginning of me showing signs of not doing well. Like
you're acting up,
yeah, kind of having, right. It's I think the outcome of trying to like suppress everything for so long. Outbursts of anger, outbursts of extreme sadness, without really knowing why, where it came from, and did a few sessions, but I actually don't know why we didn't. I didn't really open up to this person. We didn't stick with it. So it was, I think, a few sessions, and that was it.
Yeah, because everything was bottled up with you, and so it's just hard, like, especially with a stranger too, to like confide about it. It was just it was something you gradually you had to like gradually come to after years, after seeking closure and dealing with things, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and I think seeking professional help is a really, really valuable thing, and it can be life-changing for and I think it just at the time I wasn't receptive to it, or didn't stick with it long enough.
Yeah. Do you wish you had from the start you had communicated more about things you were feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, if I had the chance to go back and talk to a little version of myself, I'd be like, like this is it's certainly like a very sad deal, a traumatic deal.
Yeah.
Losing our dad, as I'm talking to myself, but that I don't have to feel alone in it, that I to talk about it, to get it out. But it's one of those things. It's like, was I ready then? I think looking back, I think it worked out. I'm very grateful for my particular path and the hardships and the sort of the good things as well.
Awesome. I wanted to shift some things to Nature Unplugged.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, Nature Unplugged. So you and your wife co-founded it, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you tell me what you guys aim to do?
Yeah, certainly. And just to give a little context too, it's the book to me is like my why behind my drive or my passion with Nature Unplugged. Is to me, nature was such a key kind of healing part of my journey, and wanting to spread that word. So yeah, so we I kind of back up a little further, but so I had always loved nature, and got into, as you mentioned, had this background in bodyboarding and in yoga. So I started doing combining like mindfulness practices like yoga or meditation, things like that, with outdoor experiences such as like a guided hike or a surf lesson, and did that for a number of years. And then later teamed up with my wife, met my wife, and she had more of an education.
What's her name?
Her name is Sonia.
Sonia.
Yeah. That's good. I should say not just my wife, but say her
no,
name.
I think I probably mispronounced her name during the
No, it's all
introduction.
good.
I can't remember.
Oh, good. Yeah, Sonia, and she's incredible, and she had this strong background in education and working with college age students and different students, and we talked about shifting from just offering experiences to more kind of teaching skills, tools, and curriculum around basically healthier relationships with technology and encouraging people to reconnect with nature. So that's what we're all about now, is offering coaching, one-on-one coaching, and then also workshops with this goal to kind of bring the balance back to some nature time.
You do a lot of yoga still within Nature Unplugged?
I not necessarily with Nature Unplugged, but it's a part of my personal routine and
Core
practice.
power?
What's that?
Core power?
I
You ever
have
do that?
dabbled in core power. It's not I don't do it currently, but do you get into yoga?
Well, no, I've been to Core Power like twice.
Yeah.
That's my yoga experience in a nutshell. I went a couple months ago, and it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's super hard because it's not, especially when it's not just, crossing your legs and, like that kind of stuff, but it's, it gets into like abs and everything.
Yeah.
And, I remember, because I went into Core Power, and I remember there's this guy that was like, he was shirtless, he had an 8-pack, he was like standing on his head and everything. And so there was like all these different, school, like kind of like levels, in yoga, but it was, it wasn't about like judging yourself for like, against another person or feeling like, oh, you weren't as good as them. It was focusing on you, I felt like it was really insightful when they said it's all about finding your flow and finding, your speed and your pace, and just, being mindful about a lot of things. And I feel like, when I go on hikes or when I'm in nature myself, I feel like there's a very, relaxing and cathartic experience walking around and just being away from everything, being away from, like you got to be a success or a failure, or like, all that kind of stuff. It's a relaxing experience.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that we're not anti-tech by any means. There's a lot of wonderful aspects of tech.
You're not like burn technology or anything.
Yeah. We don't live in a yurt on a mountaintop.
You're not in a little commune or anything.
Yeah. That's a good idea. The Nature Unplugged commune. Yeah. We know very much about integrating it in a tech in a healthy way, and I think the balance has gone kind of a little too much in general in the sort of screen time heavy, tech heavy deal. So bringing it back, and nature is such a, I think, as you mentioned, for those reasons, a really wonderful balance for the constant notifications and the screen time and the comparison and all that.
It's definitely changed because, it used to be like, like you're watching TV, that's screen time. So if you're watching TV for an hour, like, oh, you spent like an hour of screen time. But now it's, you've got your phone on you all the time. And it's something like, the average person, like, based on just looking at their phone, it's like 5 to 6 hours a day of screen time, which is absurd when you think about it. Like there's so much time spent, just staring at like a glass screen that lights up and disrupts your sleep patterns and all of that.
Yeah, and it's pretty remarkable. And there's I think a growing body of evidence, in the psychology field and education that are kind of more clearly showing the impacts of all this screen time.
You got a master's degree from University of San Diego in leadership.
Correct.
Right. What was your what did you want to do with that? Was that so like for leadership, was that that you use that for Nature Unplugged, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It was I was always really interested in psychology, so I was kind of originally I was like, psychology, that's the track, or counseling psychology, that's the track for me. And then I had a chance to speak with some of the leadership professors and learn a little bit more about that, and it was incredible because it had aspects of psychology, of organizational psychology, and then leadership theory and things like that. And when we had already been doing the Nature Unplugged stuff, and this was an opportunity to learn really how to harness this message, get it out there. There's a lot of practical skills that we learned, like how to facilitate, how to run workshops, how to do those things. And so it was a really, really
Morrow
awesome.
and Weston.
What's that?
Morrow and Weston. Does that ring a bell?
Morrow and Weston.
I took a leadership class at San Diego State a year ago.
Oh, cool.
And I took it for one semester because I was in the leadership community at my dorm, and so we were in a leadership class and we were learning about just like leadership pyramids and all that, and we were learning about what was another topic? It was about like leadership. It was a lot about leadership theories and just things you can implement, and it was talking about just different things about like what kind of leader are you, or it delved into personality types as well.
Right. Yeah.
And like I was like, I'm a campaigner, is
Yeah.
my, specific personality type based on this website that did it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm a campaigner too, actually.
Campaigner.
But it's interesting, right? Because you can, like a lot of different fields of study. There's a lot of different tons of theories, and there's a lot of valuable stuff. And I think what I came away with, very simply put, is like the leader you are is the person you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so how this ties into Nature Unplugged is we're kind of looking at young people and think about the impact this amount of screen time is having on the person they are, and how's that going to impact their capacity to move forward and eventually be in leadership roles and things like that. And, where does the face-to-face conversation go, and their sense of, it's hard to get in touch with who you are, I think, when you're when all the information is coming at you from a screen.
And I also feel like too, when you it's almost as if the whole concept of smartphones and everything has almost destroyed boredom,
Right.
or the idea of boredom, because boredom often leads to creativity, and it leads to thinking a lot, and it leads to how you feel about yourself. And because I remember when I was a little kid, like when I was bored, that was when I would start imagining things like and like stories and ideas and just different things. And I feel like I joked to my mom, I was like, I was so much more creative when I was a little kid than before, like I discovered like video games and, like smartphones and all that. And I feel like, it just like it helps to be away from things that constantly like stimulate you in your mind when, you're looking for entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And I think that's something we incorporate into our curriculum is the importance of unstructured free time, ideally outside. That is just so good for our creativity and for the reasons you mentioned. And it's a really interesting practice to think about, the next time it's boredom, and maybe as we get a little older, discomfort. You're in an awkward situation, kind of, in an elevator or something like that.
Pull out your phone.
Yeah, everyone just pulls out their phone. I do the same thing, and it's becoming.
You're at a party and you don't want to talk to anybody. You pull out your phone.
Sneak over here and pull out my phone. I'm doing something. I'm involved, but it's kind of a defense thing, So it's
almost like it's like a shield, It's like, oh, I'm on my phone, so it's not like I'm just like standing around awkwardly.
It's not like I have to try and talk to you, another human being, and that can be uncomfortable. And so that's a really important point.
If I wanted to get involved, or if someone else wanted to get involved, like what could I do?
I would say first check out the website, natureunplugged.com, and so we have a variety of resources on there, and continuing to improve.
You have consultations, right?
We do, consultations and one-on-one coaching work. So we work with folks one-on-one, and then also we'll be offering a variety of workshops and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw some pictures you had, and it was, I think you were leading something outside with a group of people. They looked young. Looked like there were kids. Yeah,
we've worked with middle school, high school, and college, as well as young adults.
Is that mainly what you do right now?
Yep. Yeah. You kind of split my time between Nature Unplugged and getting out and talking about the book and
awesome.
Breaking the stigma around sales.
How are sales doing?
Sales are doing pretty well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for checking in. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. We got a couple minutes left, but yeah, so it's Amazon is the main. That's the main place you can buy it, or is it also there's links elsewhere? Or?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.com. It's on basically all book selling platforms, Barnes and Noble, and then I also have a personal website which has more information about the book. That's SebastianSlovin.com.
Awesome. It's self-published, right?
Correct, self-published.
So Nature Unplugged is also a publishing company.
That's right. Yeah, we got another book in the mix, so more of a practical kind of tools and tips.
You're writing another book?
Yeah, more specific to Nature Unplugged. But so yeah, it's our publishing house. Yeah.
And you wrote another book, right? The Adventures of Inu, the Tale of the Giant Whale.
Yeah, the Tale of the Giant Whale. Yeah, and I know we don't have much time, but it's an awesome story about encouraging people of all ages to get outside through this character named Inu.
Well, this has been really great for me because I've learned a lot from just this one book about dealing with things and being resilient, and I feel like it's a book that other people my age or younger or older should also look at, because I feel like in this society, like you really like it's hard to try and cope with things when like the whole world is telling you like, oh, you need to be great and you need to be successful. So I really learned a lot from this book, and it was really cool because I dabble in writing myself, and so it's great to, you know, read a book and then get to meet the author, you know, right after finishing it and getting to talk about it. So thank you so much for joining me today, Sebastian. It's been really great.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Philip. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks,
And Susan, thank you for organizing all this.
Right?
Yeah, yes,
Instagram.
on Facebook, Instagram, all the social media platforms, etc.
Sebastian Slovin, that's your handle.
Sebastian Slovin, yeah.
Sweet.
And Nature
And Nature
Unplugged.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to start surfing.
Let's get it going.
We should.
Yeah. Summertime. Water's warm. Big swell right now.
Right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me on Mainstage Mavericks. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we will see you all next week. Have a good evening.